Visayas. So for those of you who are not quite familiar with the Philippines yet, we're made up of 3 big regions. The Luzon in the north, where the capital is, the Visayas, where I grew up, and Mindanao, where you are in right now. So let me start by mentioning the panda in the room. Not the elephant, but the panda. Okay, do you see the spots on my skin? That's why I call it the panda in the room. Okay. So thank you, MPI, for giving me this platform to save myself from explaining it to each and every one of you every time we have a meal together. So who knows what this is? Right, not that many. I see only about 2-3 hands. Starts with the letter V. It's vitiligo. Okay? And the most famous person that I can think of that had this is of the same name. Michael Jackson. Oh, did you know? Okay. I grew up before I had vitiligo. Vitiligo is part of atopy or an allergic reaction. It's not life-threatening. Well, if you're affected by how you look, then it will affect you. But since I don't care, I'm okay. I'm going to connect that with what we do here. All my life, I've been thinking, Michael Jackson just wanted to be white. Until I stepped into Michael Jackson's shoes and realized why he had to do what he did. Bleached himself. Because he did not want to look like a panda or a Dalmatian. For a performer like him, understandable, right? But this is the thing about stories. I never knew the reasons behind what Michael Jackson did until I got to experience that myself with this condition. So I am a firm believer in the power of telling stories. Because stories help forge understanding, connect, and inspire. So allow me to explain this to you by telling 3 or 4 stories that will take you through different eras of my personal journey in building peace. And the first happened here at MPI 24 years ago. Yes, I was one of you, just sitting there, getting ready to learn, excited. So to give it a bit of context, why do they keep on saying the word impacto? Impacto has 2 meanings. It literally is a translation of impact, which is how we're using it. That myself, including my and others, are impact of MPI's Annual Peacebuilding Training. But it's a play on another word in Tagalog and Cebuano, which means evil spirit. So, consider us not the evil spirits of MPI. But since it's been more than 20 years, and most of us development workers know, we can now call ourselves impact. No longer outputs, but impact. I'm sure your facilitators will explain the difference in some of the courses, right? Look forward to that. So, I am an impact. The first story is about when I came to MPI as a student leader coming from Silliman University, where Alfred is from and also from. They sent me because they wanted a student leader to be trained in peace building and help in the running of a newly created Peace Resource Center. So I came, student leader, very aggressive, very, very competitive. That was my move. But it was the story that sort of forged understanding for me. Happened in my class, which I think Memento.
We were together.
In in that class, so Mehmet was one of my first facilitators 24 years ago. 24 years ago. In that class, I heard a Muslim coming from Mindanao say this: "You Filipinos." And I looked at him and I said, "Wait a minute, you're from Mindanao. Are you Filipinos?" That bothered me. Really bothered me. That after class, or I think even during class, I had to ask him. And most of you know this guy. He's quite famous. Also in the Mindanao Peacebuilding circles. Musa Sangila. So Musa Sangila was my classmate. And I had to ask him. I was born here in Davao. But at 10, I moved out and lived and grew up in the Visayas. At around 19 or 20, I was sent back here to hear somebody say, "You Filipinos." And I thought he was a Filipino too. So I had to ask, "Wait, are you a Filipino as well?" And he told me the story of the Bangsamoro people and the struggle that they've had to go through. I was growing up here, friends with Muslims, but I didn't even know there was a problem. And because of the story I heard, I came to understand a bit more. Fast forward to my second year at MPI, returnee. So in the peace process, they have what they call rebel returnee, a peace builder returnee. Because I was so inspired, I wanted to learn more. I sat in the class of Atile and Muhammad Abu Nimer on dialogue. And they had an activity. The activity, they called on all Mindanaoans to form a circle for a dialogue process, which I believe some of your facilitators, I don't want to preempt it, will use in your class. And they asked all those who are not from the Philippines to form a circle around them to observe. Seeing that I was the only one who was not from Mindanao, also I thought, I said, "Excuse me, can I just go with the non-Filipinos to observe the Mindanaoan dialogue?" Because they identified them as Lumad, indigenous, Christian, and Muslim. And I felt that I did not quite, rather Christian, the term used at that time was secular. Because if you don't know yet, for those who are not from the Philippines, do talk to the Mindanaoans about its history and how many Filipinos who have been Christianized from Luzon and the Visayas were moved to Mindanao. And such they were called settlers. And I felt that I did not belong to any of the three categories. So I said, "Can I just sit at the back?" Immediately, the Mindanaoans in the inner circle reacted. And naturally, our amazing facilitators did not even say start. That dialogue just naturally happened because of my request. The Mindanaoans were telling me, "You Filipinos from Visayas and Luzon have as much a stake in our problem as we are." And I felt like I had to discuss, but back and forth within that circle, I realized, wait, I cannot be an innocent bystander in the problem. I have as much a role in this as those who are detached in Luzon or in the north of the Philippines. That's the second story that I heard that forged understanding. Fast forward to the second point. Eventually, it was also here at MPI that I met people from the office that practically became my first foray in a career in peace building. Meaning, just as a volunteer, you're being paid to do peace. And that's the Office of the Presidential Advisor on the peace process. How many of you, and I know there's a big delegation here, can you stand up, please? These are the unsung men and women working for the peace process within the Philippine government. They're now called the Office of the Presidential Advisor on Peace, Reconciliation, coordination and unity. It was not MPI that I met your colleagues from 24 years ago, but we looked at them with suspicion because they work for the government. And eventually, after studying in India, in Spain, peace studies and all that, because I became very serious because of that impact in me of MPI, I became very serious about studying peace. When I came back, I went to Manila, went to their office, brought my CV and said, hire me. No, it really happened that way. I told them, look. And then when they saw my CV, they're like, oh, you've been everywhere. Hire me. Because the next best thing for me at that time was call center. No, that's not a bad job. But if you've been studying and working for peace, you might not want to be working for a call center, right? So what's the second story? I was sent as a junior peace program officer. I was handling a training program which Madet and I worked on. Now we're working together at that time. This was the first support of Japan to the government of the Philippines and Moro Islamic Liberation Front peace talks. This was way before a peace agreement was signed. And we were training their people to become development workers. And that designed that course. So I had to visit their areas, and one of which is in a far-flung island called Tanang Basilan. And later on, when I interacted with the military, I realized how conflicted that island was. But to get there, I had to fly from Manila, where I was based, to Zamboanga City. Get a boat to Basilan. And then from Basilan, take a long van ride, and then take another boat to this remote island that only had one solar panel for electricity. So you can imagine, it was a sky full of stars. Beautiful. Okay? But, that context, I needed to explain to the community folks what the peace process was. Area with no electricity. That already tells you they don't get any news from Manila. And now I need to explain to them why the MILF and the government are talking in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. How do I do this? Storytelling. And there's one story that I've always used as a metaphor for the peace process. Who's from South Asia? South Asia, India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, okay? So there's one story that came from Hindustan. The blind man and the elephant. Who knows this story? Okay. So a bunch of blind men was told by the king to go and tell me, blind from birth, to go and tell me what an elephant is. They touch the elephant, they say, the elephant is like, and it's the nose, oh, it's like a snake. Oh, it's like a spear, or it's like a wall. They come together, they don't agree, they fight. Okay? I use that metaphor to explain the need to dialogue between the MILF and the government. So I was confident because I've done it in so many areas. We gathered in a mosque. The community was there, waiting for this official from the national government. I don't speak their language. I speak at least 2 Philippine languages, Cebuano and Tagalog. So I had to tell it in Tagalog. And somebody would translate it to their language. So I said, ang mga bulag at ang elefante, the blind man and the elephant. And so when the translator translated, then there was commotion in the mosque. And I was like, what's going on? Why is the translator explaining no longer translating? And it went on and I said, okay, what's the problem? You know what the translator told me? Sir, they don't know what an elephant is. People, this is a small island in the middle of nowhere with only one solar panel. And that got me to think, oh damn, I'm using the wrong metaphor. On the way to the village, I saw a water buffalo. So I immediately said, okay, reset. Ang mga bulag at ang kalabaw. The blind men and the buffalo. And I could hear everyone, okay? So the point, earlier, in my case, I forgot to mention the point of the earlier story. So in terms of stories helping forge understanding, telling your story, sharing your fears, listening to where others are coming from, listening to their perspectives, helps forge understanding. Hold on to your truth, that's important. But be open to others' realities as well. MPI is a safe space. So share openly, but also take generously. Because there are a lot of stories to be told here. On the second point, and how I make sure that story connected with this community that has long been out of reach by government. Stories can help connect remote communities to complicated processes that are beyond their reach. But we need to be mindful of the context of those who are listening and the metaphors we use. We need to help them understand in their own terms, in metaphors that make sense. Context matters. Finally, and the last story, I know you're all eager now to share your own stories with your classmates. After that experience, I continued working for the peace process office. But on the side, since I have a background in peace studies, I also went into teaching in the De La Salle College of St. Benil Peace and Conflict Studies. It's a very academic environment, but since I was molded by MPI as a workshop facilitator, I designed my course so that it's very interactive. There are many activities. It became quite a popular course at De La Salle Benil that I had to tell administration to keep it a secret where my sections were, because I don't want to end up with 50 students while the other section only had 20. Imagine all the papers I have to check. You know this, Alar, right? You know this job. So, one time when I was riding the elevator at OPA, the other process of which I was not involved. So in OPA, there is a panel that negotiates with the CPP, NPA, and PF. One of the negotiators there saw me in the elevator and she said, "Hey, I have something to tell you." I'm like, "What?" "We have a new intern in our JMC, the Joint Monitoring Committee for the career, with the other side." So I said, "Oh, it must be one of my students." So she told me, "No, apparently she's not your student." And I'm like, "What? So what's she doing there?" Because I always make it a point to encourage my students to do their internship at the peace process office. So she told me the story. When we asked her why she was applying for the JMC, the Joint Monitoring Committee, she mentioned your name. And I said, "Okay, but I don't know her." She said, "Well, she wasn't your student, but her classmates were." And I'm like, "Okay." And she goes, "But they would talk about your class every night that she ended up being inspired." And I'm like, "What? I can retire now." Stories. Each one of you has stories waiting to be told. The next story that inspires somebody here at MPI 2025 could be yours. But as you claim your space to tell your stories, do be conscious that you also provide space and time for others to tell theirs. Let your stories inspire, but allow yourself to be inspired as well. So telling stories, does it connect at all to bridging theory and practice? Telling stories is one way we facilitators at MPI connect high-valuing theories to everyday realities. These stories, however, will not only come from us facilitators. We will expect them from you, not just during class, but also while you are taking your breakfast or dinner or going for night out in the city of Davao with your newfound friends. The diversity that MPI brings together, 124 stories this year, creates a colorful tapestry of stories that perhaps you can use when you go back to your communities to help forge understanding among those in conflict, connect with communities that have long been out of reach, or inspire the next breed of peace builders, the next Impactos. Welcome to the Mindanao Peacebuilding Institute 2025.